"I know what you did last December," I said, holding the photo that exposed a family betrayal over inheritance no one expected an elderly retired woman to uncover. The fireplace crackled in my son's living room, but the warmth could not soften the truth about stolen property, broken trust, and a quiet scheme hidden inside our family drama. As everyone stared at me in shock, they still believed I was weak, unaware that this moment would unravel every secret they thought was safely buried. No one spoke. The clock above the mantel ticked steadily, each second landing heavier than the last. Her hand hovered just above the arm of my son's chair, fingers stiff, as if her body had forgotten how to move. For a brief moment, her face betrayed her. Not guilt, calculation. The look of someone measuring exits that no longer existed. My son stared at me like I had spoken in another language. His mouth opened, then closed. I could see the struggle behind his eyes, loyalty pulling him in one direction, instinct tugging him in another. He had not expected this from me. None of them had. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. The photo trembled slightly between my fingers, not from fear, but from memory. The edges were worn from being handled too many times in secret. The image caught the chandelier light just enough to reveal what mattered. A signature. A date. December. A transfer that was never meant to happen. She had chosen that month carefully. Grief was still raw then. Paperwork blurred together. Trust was easy to borrow. Outside, the wind pressed against the windows, carrying the low whistle of another winter night. Inside, the room felt smaller than it ever had, crowded with truths that had been quietly rearranging the furniture for months. "You're confused," she said at last, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "This is a misunderstanding." I watched her as she spoke. The way her shoulders squared just a fraction too tightly. The way her fingers curled into her sleeve, nails pressing hard enough to leave marks. She had spent her life managing situations. She believed she could still manage this one. "I am not," I said. "And it isn't." The pain came then. Not sharp, not dramatic. A slow, spreading ache that settled deep in my chest, heavy and familiar, like winter cold sinking into bone. I had trusted her once. Worse, I had trusted my own silence. They had mistaken my calm for blindness, my age for weakness, my grief for confusion. My son shook his head slowly. "Mom, what is this?" His voice cracked, just enough to betray how badly he wanted the answer to be anything else. I looked at him then. Really looked. The lines around his eyes. The familiar slope of his shoulders. He was still the boy who used to believe I could fix anything just by being steady. "I needed to be certain," I said. Before I said a word, the room seemed to lean inward. I could feel the weight of what was coming, pressing against the present, like a storm waiting for permission to break. This was not victory. It was not revenge. It was reckoning. And it hurt more than I had imagined. If you have ever discovered a significant truth, I would love to hear from you in the comments. Follow along, because this is just the beginning of mine. But to understand how we arrived here, how a winter smile turned into something sharper, let me take you back to the morning before I knew anything at all. The first snow fell early that year. I remember standing at the kitchen window with a mug warming my hands, watching it settle over the garden like a careful apology. December had always been my month. Quiet. Predictable. A time for reflection, not surprises. That morning, the house was still mine in every way that mattered. The walls held familiar echoes. The furniture knew my shape. Even the silence felt earned. She arrived just after 9. I heard her before I saw her. Her laugh carried through the hallway, bright and confident, the sound of someone who believed she belonged. When she stepped into the kitchen, she brought the cold with her. shaking snow from her coat as though the space had already made room. "You should really think about downsizing," she said lightly, glancing around. "So much space for one person." It was meant to sound helpful. It did not. I smiled anyway. Years of living had taught me when a smile was armor. "This house has taken care of me," I said. "I return the favor." She nodded, though I could tell she wasn't listening. Her eyes drifted down the hallway toward the study. The filing cabinets. The locked drawer. I noticed it then. The first flicker of unease. It was small, the kind of moment most people forget before lunch. But it stayed with me, settling somewhere just behind my ribs. That afternoon, I found the envelope. It wasn't hidden. That was the strange part. It sat neatly on the desk in the study, placed as though it belonged there. My name was written across the front in handwriting I did not recognize. Inside was a copy. Never an original, just a copy. A deed transfer dated 2 weeks earlier, December. My heart didn't race, it slowed. I sat down, the paper trembling in my hands as understanding crept in quietly, like cold through floorboards. There were no missing signatures, no obvious mistakes, just one detail that refused to make sense. I had never signed it. That night, I said nothing. I watched instead. I listened. I noticed how she spoke for my son when questions arose, how decisions were framed as already settled, how the house slowly stopped being called mine and started being called ours. Each day added a thread. A comment here, a document out of place there, a gentle suggestion that I should rest more, let others handle the details. I let them believe I was retreating. What they never considered was that I was paying attention. Winter has a way of revealing things. Leaves fall. Paths clear. Sound carries farther in the cold. By the time the snow melted, I knew enough to be dangerous. By the time the fireplace crackled again, I was done being quiet, and she still believed she was in control. Looking back now, I understand something I didn't then. Truth doesn't announce itself loudly. It waits, patient, certain, until the moment you are ready to carry it into the light. And when you do, it changes everything that comes after. Winter settled deeper after that, not with drama, but with persistence. Snow hardened along the edges of the driveway. The air inside the house grew drier, quieter. Conversations became careful. I noticed how often my son checked his phone now, how quickly it disappeared back into his pocket when I entered the room. She stayed longer on those visits. Overnight bags appeared in the guest room, her shoes lined up neatly by the door, as if she had always lived there. I told myself not to imagine patterns where none existed. Grief does that to a person. It makes you suspicious of shadows. Still, the unease followed me from room to room, subtle but steady. One afternoon, while she was out shopping and my son was at work, I opened the study again. I had no plan, only a feeling that something was still unfinished. The filing cabinet resisted slightly when I pulled the bottom drawer. I paused, listening, then continued. Inside were folders I recognized, and some I did not. Insurance papers, old tax returns, correspondence I had not seen before. One folder was thinner than the rest. Inside it was a letter, not addressed to me, not addressed to my son either. It was written to her, dated months before she ever claimed to have met him. The tone was familiar, too familiar, the language of someone confident in being believed. I read it twice, then a third time more slowly. It spoke of timing, of patience, of positioning oneself carefully. It mentioned my husband's name once, casually, as if his life were a stepping stone rather than a story. My hands felt cold as I set the letter down. So she had known us before we knew her. That realization shifted something inside me. Until then, I had imagined opportunism, a chance taken when circumstances aligned. This was different. This was deliberate. I replaced the folder exactly as I found it and closed the drawer. That evening at dinner, she served the soup. My soup. The recipe she had asked for just weeks earlier. She smiled as she handed me the bowl, watching my reaction as though she were testing something. "How is it?" she asked. "Comforting," I said. "Familiar." My son smiled, relieved by the normalcy of it all. "She's learning all your tricks," he said. I returned the smile. "Some things take longer than others." She laughed softly, but her eyes stayed on me a moment too long. Later that night, I overheard them talking in the living room. Not arguing, something worse. Strategizing. Their voices low, careful, punctuated by pauses that suggested decisions already made. "She'll come around," she said. "They always do." I stood at the top of the stairs, unseen, the banister cold beneath my palm. My son hesitated. I could hear it in his breathing. "I don't want to push her." "We're not pushing," she replied. "We're planning." That word stayed with me. Planning. The next day, I visited the bank. The young man behind the desk was polite, in the way people are when they believe they are dealing with someone fragile. He spoke slowly, explaining procedures I had followed for decades. I let him finish. "I'd like copies of all recent transactions tied to this property," I said when he paused. He blinked. "Of course. May I ask why?" "You may," I said. "I won't be answering." The papers took a week to arrive. In that time, my son stopped asking me questions, stopped sharing details. Our conversations became brief, surface level. She filled the space where closeness used to live, efficient and smiling. When the envelope came, I opened it alone. The transactions told a story that did not belong to chance. Fees paid early. Signatures processed quickly. Accounts shifted in anticipation of something larger. She had been laying groundwork long before she stepped through my door with snow on her coat and laughter in her voice. I felt something then that surprised me. Not anger, not fear, clarity. That night, I called an old friend, a woman who had worked alongside my husband years ago, someone who understood discretion as a form of respect. "I need help," I told her. "Quiet help." There was a pause on the line, then a steady answer. "Tell me what you found." Days turned into weeks. Winter pressed on. Outwardly, nothing changed. Meals were shared, smiles exchanged, plans discussed. Inside, the pieces were aligning. She began to speak more openly around me, confident now. She talked about renovations, about selling, about what would be easier once everything was settled. "You shouldn't have to worry about all this," she said one afternoon, touching my arm. "You've carried enough." The kindness felt practiced. "I agree," I said. "I prefer certainty." She nodded, mistaking my words for surrender. The letter was not the only one. My friend found others. Different names. Different families. A pattern too consistent to ignore. By the time my son announced they were thinking of making things official, I already knew what that meant. The announcement came at dinner, her hand resting lightly over his. "We want to make sure you're comfortable," my son said. "With the future." I met his gaze. "Comfortable is a matter of honesty." She squeezed his hand. "We'll handle everything." That night, I lay awake listening to the house settle, pipes creaking, wind brushing against the eaves. I thought about all the years I had believed silence was a form of peace. I was wrong. Silence had simply given her room to move. When spring came, it would bring more than thawed ground. It would bring decisions that could not be undone. And she still believed she was ahead of me. That was her mistake. The first time my son stopped calling me by Mom, I did not notice it right away. It happened in a small moment, the kind that slips past you if you are not listening closely enough. We were in the kitchen. He was holding a mug. She was leaning against the counter with that easy confidence, as if she had been born into the shape of our home. "Can you sign this?" he asked, setting an envelope down near my place. "Not Mom. Not even a gentle ma. Just, can you sign this? Like I was an employee and he had a form." I looked at the envelope without touching it. "What is it?" He hesitated, and the hesitation told me more than his answer could. "It's just something to make things easier," he said. "If anything happens. So she can help handle things." She smiled softly. "It's a standard authorization. It protects you, too. Protects you. People say that when they want you to stop asking questions." I took a slow breath. The scent of coffee was strong, but behind it I could smell the faint sharpness of her perfume. Always a little too present, like a statement. "Leave it there," I said. "I will read it later." My son's jaw tightened. "It's not a big deal." "No," I agreed. "It's not. That is why it can wait." She touched his arm, just a brief brush, but it calmed him like a practice signal. He nodded and turned away, the envelope left on the table like bait. I waited until they were both out of the room before I opened it. It was not a standard authorization. It was a power of attorney. Not a full one, not the kind that screams danger at first glance. It was written in careful language, wrapped in polite phrases about convenience and support. But the effect was the same. It would give her access. It would give her authority. It would give her the ability to speak with my voice when I was not in the room. I closed it and set it back exactly where it had been. The kitchen clock ticked. The refrigerator hummed. The house, as always, pretended nothing was wrong. That afternoon, my friend called me with a voice I recognized from years ago. The voice she used when she had already confirmed what she feared. "She has done this before," she said. I sat in my armchair with the curtains half drawn. Outside, the sky hung low and white, the world reduced to bare branches and wet pavement. "How sure are you?" I asked. "As sure as I can be without putting my hands on a confession," she said. Different city, different name, same pattern. She attaches herself to someone vulnerable. She gets close to the family. She pushes paperwork through when no one is looking. And when she's done, she disappears and leaves ruin behind her. My fingers tightened around the phone. "Does she ever get caught?" There was a pause. "Not the way she should." I let that settle. I could feel the old instincts returning, the ones I had used long before retirement, the ones that told me not to rush, not to confront too early, not to reveal what I knew until I knew enough. "What else?" I asked. "She had help," my friend said. "At least once. A man who handled documents. Not a lawyer, not officially. Someone who knew how to move things quickly. If she's doing this again, he might be nearby." A man. That was new. I thanked her, hung up, and sat still for a long time. I did not cry. I did not panic. The calm in me was not numbness. It was the stillness that comes when something inside you has finally made a decision. My son came home late that night, his shoulders hunched against the cold. She followed close behind him, laughing as she brushed snow from her hair, telling him a story about a cashier who had been rude. They looked like a couple building a life together. And that was the cruelest part, because I could see the tenderness in him, the way he watched her face, hungry for her approval, the way he flinched when she corrected him, then pretended he had not. He was not just being deceived, he was being trained. At dinner, she brought up the subject again. "We should set things up," she said, cutting into her chicken with delicate precision. "Your mother deserves peace. She deserves to stop worrying about bills and paperwork." "I'm not worried," I said. She smiled wider. "That's exactly the point." My son cleared his throat. "Mom, it would help. She's right. It's just a safeguard." I met his eyes. "From what?" He looked away. That small movement, that refusal to hold my gaze, felt like a crack in something I had relied on my entire life. I set my fork down carefully. You want my signature, I said, but you cannot tell me what you are afraid of. He sighed, frustration rising. I'm not afraid. I'm just trying to plan ahead. Planning ahead, I repeated, soft enough that it sounded harmless. She took a sip of wine. There's no need to turn this into a conflict. I smiled politely. Conflicts do not begin when someone speaks. They begin when someone lies. My son's face flushed. Mom! She reached for his hand under the table. He let her take it. That gesture was quiet, but it landed hard. After dinner, I washed the dishes slowly, letting the warm water run over my hands longer than necessary. They talked in the living room. I could hear her voice, low and soothing. I could hear his, tight and uncertain. Then I heard my name. She's being stubborn, he said. She's scared, she replied. It's normal at her age. You have to be firm. Firm, like you would be with a child. My hands paused under the water. I kept my breathing even. I focused on the sound of the faucet, on the simple act of rinsing a plate, because if I let myself feel what I wanted to feel, I might have walked into that room and said something that would end this too soon. Instead, I dried my hands and went upstairs without a word. In my bedroom, I opened the drawer where I kept the few things I still could not throw away. My husband's old watch, a bundle of letters tied with ribbon, a small key I had never used, and beneath them, the folder I had started building quietly. Copies of transactions, notes with dates, names of offices, photographs. I added the power of attorney envelope to it. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall until the house fell asleep around me. Sometime after midnight, I heard footsteps downstairs. Soft, careful, not the heavy steps of my son. I stood and moved to the top of the stairs, keeping to the shadow. The hallway was dark, but a thin line of light spilled from the study. Someone was inside. I did not rush down. I did not shout. I waited, listening to the faint sounds. A drawer sliding. Paper shifting. The soft click of a cabinet closing. Then the light went out. Footsteps moved toward the living room. The front door opened with a quiet sigh, then shut again. I stood perfectly still. When I finally went downstairs, the study looked untouched. The desk was neat. The filing cabinet closed. The room smelled faintly of her perfume, like a signature left behind on purpose. I walked to the cabinet and opened the bottom drawer. The thin folder was still there, but something inside it had changed. The letter I had found was gone. In its place was a blank sheet of paper. Not an accident, a message. I closed the drawer and rested my hand on the cabinet for a moment, letting myself feel the cold metal under my palm. So she knew I was looking. That was the first true twist, the one that turned my quiet investigation into a real game. She was not simply stealing, she was watching the watcher. Upstairs, my son slept. He had no idea someone had moved through his home in the night, rearranging our future with silent hands. I returned to my room and sat at the window until morning. When the sky finally lightened, I made a decision. I would no longer collect clues for my own peace of mind. I would collect them for a reckoning. And I would do it carefully, because now I understood the most dangerous truth of all. She was not afraid of me. Yet, by morning the house wore innocence the way fresh snow wears light. My son made coffee, humming under his breath as if the night had not happened, as if someone had not stepped into the study and removed a single sheet of paper that mattered more than the rest. She came downstairs a little later, hair pinned back, face calm, already dressed. No smudged makeup, no drowsy softness. Just that composed readiness that always made me feel as though she had been awake longer than everyone else, arranging the day to her liking. She kissed my son on the cheek and greeted me with a sweetness that felt deliberate. "Did you sleep well?" she asked. Well enough, I said. My son glanced between us, searching for weather. He found none. I kept my voice steady. She kept her smile. The quiet between us was new now. It had shape. It had intent. After breakfast, she offered to take my car to run errands. "Your tires are better in the snow," she said easily, holding her keys up like a small favor. "Mine slide." My son nodded, already persuaded. "That's smart. I watched her." "Where are you going?" "Just to the post office and the hardware store." "Maybe the bank," she added, as if it were an afterthought. I did not like that addition. I liked it even less when she said it while looking directly at me. "You won't need my car for that," I said. "The post office is 5 minutes away." Her smile remained. "It's fine. I'll be quick." My son gave me the look he used when he wanted peace, the look that asked me to be reasonable. So I nodded. "All right." She left with my keys, and the house exhaled as soon as the door shut behind her. My son returned to his phone, scrolling, tapping, disappearing into whatever life she had encouraged him to build outside of me. I waited 10 minutes, then put on my coat. Not to follow her like a spy. Not for drama. Simply because I did not believe in coincidences anymore. The winter air bit at my cheeks as I stepped outside. The street was pale and quiet, the kind of quiet that makes sound feel too loud. I walked to my own car, started it, and drove slowly, staying far enough back that I could pretend I was just another person out on errands. At the post office, she parked and went in. She did not come out quickly. I sat across the street, hands on the steering wheel, watching the entrance. It was not just time that bothered me. It was her stillness when she moved. Her efficiency. No hesitation, no confusion. She carried herself like she had done these things before in 100 different towns. When she finally emerged, she did not head back to the car. She crossed the parking lot and approached a man waiting near the corner of the building. He was not old, not young either. Somewhere in between, dressed in his simple coat, hands in his pockets. He looked ordinary in the way some people choose to look ordinary. He was the kind of man you would forget the moment he passed you in a grocery aisle. She spoke to him briefly. He handed her a thin envelope. She did not open it. She slipped it into her bag and touched his arm lightly, familiar. He nodded once and walked away without looking back. A small exchange. Quick. Clean. My stomach tightened, but my hands stayed steady. I watched her return to the car and drive off. I did not follow her to the hardware store. I followed her to the bank. She parked in the visitor section and went inside without glancing around. That told me she did not expect anyone to be watching. Or she expected it and did not care. I waited again, parked 2 rows away, my view half blocked by a tree. The branches shook lightly in the wind, scattering bits of frost. She was inside for less than 15 minutes. When she came out, she carried nothing visible, no folder, no box. But she walked differently, lighter, like she had accomplished something. On the drive home, I kept my distance. In my mind, I replayed the exchange at the post office. The man. The envelope. The ease between them. My friend had warned me about a helper, someone who handled documents, someone who knew how to move things quickly. Now I had a face to attach to that warning. Back at the house, I arrived 5 minutes after she did. She was already in the kitchen, placing my keys back on the hook, her movements careful, considerate, like she had never held them. "Post office was crowded," she said before I could ask. "People mailing late packages." I nodded, peeling my gloves off slowly. "Did you get everything done?" "Yes," she said. "All done." My son smiled. "See? No problem. No problem. That night, while they watched television, I went upstairs and called my friend again. I saw him, I said. There was a pause, then the small sound of her shifting in a chair. The man? Yes, at the post office. She met him there. He gave her an envelope. My friend exhaled. That fits. What do I do now? You do not confront her? She said immediately. Not yet. If she knows you have eyes on her, she will tighten up. She will move faster, or she will disappear. She already knows I am looking, I said, thinking of the blank sheet of paper in the folder. She knows you are curious, my friend corrected. That is not the same as knowing you are dangerous. I closed my eyes for a moment. How do I find out who he is? My friend's voice lowered. There are ways, quiet ways, but you will need someone local, someone who can ask questions without raising alarms. I have no one, I said, and the truth of it landed heavier than I expected. You have me, she replied, and you have your husband's old colleague, remember? The one who still works near records and filings. I remembered then, a name I had not spoken in years. A man who used to bring my husband documents to sign and always treated me like I mattered in the room. I can call him, I said. Do, she answered, and listen carefully. If this man is connected to filings, he will have a trail. Even people who think they are clean leave smudges. After I hung up, I sat at the edge of my bed staring at my hands. They looked older than they felt, the skin thinner, the veins more visible, the knuckles swollen from time. But they were still my hands. They had held babies, signed mortgages, packed lunches, held my husband's face when he could not speak at the end. And now they would hold the line. The next afternoon, I drove to a small cafe across town, where I knew I would not be recognized. The windows were fogged from heat, and the air smelled like cinnamon and burnt espresso. I chose a booth near the back, where I could see the door without looking like I was watching it. He arrived 10 minutes late, which made me trust him more. People who come exactly on time often want control. Elaine, he said softly as he slid into the booth. His hair had gone gray. His face was older, but his eyes were the same. Sharp and kind. Thank you for coming, I said. You sounded worried, he replied. What is going on? I did not hand him my folder. I did not spill everything. I gave him only what he needed. My son is involved with someone, I said, and I believe paperwork has been moved without my consent, property related. His expression tightened. Do you have proof? I have pieces, I said, and I have reason to believe she has help. A man. I saw them exchange an envelope. He leaned back slightly, thinking. Describe him. I did. The coat. The posture. The forgettable face. When I finished, he did not speak right away. He looked down at the table, then back at me. I may know that type, he said carefully. There are people who specialize in making things happen. Not always illegal on paper. Sometimes they exploit loopholes, pressure, confusion. They thrive on families who do not talk to each other. My throat tightened. Can you find him? He hesitated. If I look too directly, it will show. I am not asking you to break rules, I said. I am asking you to tell me what I can do that is still clean. That earned me a small nod. Respect. I can check public filings, he said. Quietly. I can see if your property has had any activity beyond what you already found. And if there is a name connected to a notary or witness, that can lead somewhere. My pulse stayed calm, but my mind sharpened. How long? A few days, he said. Maybe less. When we stood to leave, he touched my arm gently. Elaine, if this is what you think it is, your son is going to fight you when you expose it. I know, I said. And she is going to try to make you look unstable," he added, eyes steady. I held his gaze. "Then I will need to be more stable than anyone expects." That evening she suggested we host a small holiday gathering early. "Just close friends," she said, leaning into my son with a smile that was meant to look warm. "Something cozy. Something to make memories." My son brightened, grateful. "That would be nice." I said nothing for a moment, listening to the way she framed it. Memories. Cozy. Close. A gathering created witnesses. A gathering created pressure. A gathering created opportunities. She was planning something again. I met her eyes. "When?" "Next weekend," she said quickly. Too quickly. I nodded. "All right." Her smile widened, satisfied. She thought she was arranging the stage. She did not realize I had begun to write the ending. Later that night I returned to the study and opened the filing cabinet again, not to search, but to confirm. To see if anything else had shifted. To make sure my reality still matched the room. Everything looked the same. That is how I knew something had changed. Because when someone is moving pieces in the dark, the first thing they do is make you doubt your own eyes. I closed the drawer, turned off the light, and stood for a moment in the doorway, listening to the house breathe. Upstairs, my son laughed at something she said. Downstairs, I held my calm like a blade. Winter was not over, not even close, and now I knew she was not working alone. By midweek, the house had taken on a different rhythm. It was subtle, the kind of change only someone who has lived in a place long enough can feel. Doors closed more softly. Conversations ended when I entered a room. My son's laughter sounded thinner, stretched over something else, like fabric pulled too tight. She was preparing. Lists appeared on the counter, guest names written in neat, deliberate handwriting. Menu ideas discussed out loud, as though including me in the process were a courtesy rather than a strategy. "This will be good for everyone," she said one morning, circling a date on the calendar. A fresh start. Fresh starts are rarely meant for everyone. That afternoon, Elaine called me back. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge beneath it now, sharpened by confirmation. "I checked the filings," she said. "There has been activity on your property. More than you found." I sat at the small table by the window, sunlight catching dust in the air. "How recent?" "Very," she replied. "And very deliberate. A preliminary lien inquiry. Quiet. Almost invisible, unless you know exactly where to look. A lien meant pressure. It meant leverage. It meant someone positioning themselves to claim necessity. Is it legal?" I asked. She paused. "It is adjacent. Enough that it would take time and money to unwind. Which is usually the point. Time and money. Two things people assume an elderly woman does not have." "And the man?" I asked. "I found a name," Elaine said. "Not officially connected, but he appears as a witness on several unrelated documents across different counties. Always just close enough to matter. Never close enough to be blamed." I closed my eyes. "Can you send me what you have?" "Yes," she said, "but listen to me carefully. If this goes forward, they will try to isolate you. They will question your memory, your judgment, possibly your competence." "They already have," I said quietly. "Then you need to make sure your competence is documented," she replied, "by someone they cannot dismiss." That night, I made an appointment with my doctor. Not because I felt unwell, because I understood how stories are rewritten when no one is paying attention. The appointment was thorough. Cognitive tests, memory questions, Small talk designed to observe rather than comfort. I answered calmly, carefully, truthfully. At the end, the doctor smiled. "You're sharp," he said. "Sharper than most people your age?" "Would you be willing to put that in writing?" I asked. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "I can do that." I left his office with a folded letter in my coat pocket and a strange sense of relief. One more door quietly secured. When I returned home, she was in the living room with my son, spreading fabric samples across the coffee table. "I was thinking neutral tones," she said, looking up at me. "Something elegant, timeless. Like stone," I said. She laughed. "Exactly." My son smiled at me. "What do you think?" "I think," I said slowly, "that neutral hides stains better." She did not laugh that time. That evening, a package arrived. No return address, just my name, written in careful block letters. Inside was a copy of the letter she had removed from the filing cabinet, along with a note. "You should stop looking." No signature, no threat spelled out. Just the quiet certainty of someone used to being obeyed. I folded the note and placed it in my folder. She was not warning me, she was testing me. The gathering was 2 days away now. Friends began calling to confirm. People I had known for years. People who trusted my judgment. People who would notice if something felt off. She watched me closely during those calls, listening to my tone, my pauses, my laughter. That night, my son knocked on my bedroom door. "Can we talk?" he asked. I nodded and sat on the edge of the bed as he entered, closing the door behind him. He looked tired, older than he should have. His hands shoved into his pockets like he did not know what to do with them. "She says you don't trust her," he said. "I don't," I replied. He flinched. "Why won't you just let things be easy for once?" "Because easy for whom?" I asked gently. "For everyone," he said, frustration spilling through. "She's trying to help. She's organizing things. She's thinking about the future." "So am I," I said. He shook his head. "It doesn't feel like it. It feels like you're pushing back on everything she suggests." I reached for his hand. He hesitated, then let me take it. "When you were small," I said, "you used to ask me how I knew when something was wrong. Do you remember what I told you?" He frowned. "You said you listened." "Yes," I said. "I listened even when everyone else wanted things to sound simple." He pulled his hand away gently. "This isn't the same." "No," I agreed. "It's not. It's bigger." His voice rose. "Then tell me what you think she's doing." I looked at him for a long moment. I could have told him everything. Could have laid the papers on the bed, the letters, the timelines. Could have shattered the illusion in one blow. But he wasn't ready. "She is not who she says she is," I said instead. "That's not enough," he snapped. "It will have to be," I replied. He stood abruptly. "You're being unfair." "Possibly," I said. "But I am not being careless." He left without saying good night. The next morning, she avoided me completely. It was my son who found me in the kitchen, holding the letter from the doctor. "What's that?" he asked. "A record," I said. "Of who I am?" He frowned. "Why do you need that?" "Because," I said, folding it carefully, "people who want control often start by questioning memory." He stared at me, something flickering behind his eyes. Doubt. Or maybe recognition. That afternoon, Elaine sent one more message. "Tomorrow." One word. Enough. I spent the rest of the day preparing, not the house, but myself. I reviewed documents. I organized copies. I chose my words carefully and then set them aside, trusting they would come when needed. As evening fell, she came into the study without knocking. "I know you've been making calls," she said lightly. "People talk." "So do I," I replied. Her smile tightened. "I don't want this to be uncomfortable." "It already is," I said. She stepped closer. "You're tired. You've been through a lot. Let us take care of things." I met her gaze. "You don't take care of something by removing its owner." For the first time, irritation slipped through her composure. "You're making a mistake." "Possibly," I said, "but it will be mine." She studied me, searching for weakness. She did not find it. When she left the room, I exhaled slowly. Tomorrow would bring people, voices, witnesses. Tomorrow would bring the beginning of the end. And she still believed she could control the story. She had no idea how carefully I had been writing mine. The day of the gathering arrived with a softness that felt insulting. Sunlight filtered through thin winter clouds, bright enough to make the snow glitter, gentle enough to suggest peace. The kind of day that makes people believe nothing terrible can happen because the world looks clean. Inside my house, she moved like a conductor. She rearranged platters, adjusted candles, smoothed napkins until their edges were sharp, every detail placed with quiet authority. She wore cream-colored cashmere, the shade of innocence, and a smile that promised warmth while keeping everyone at a distance. My son followed her around with the nervous devotion of someone trying to please the person who decides whether he is good or not. He checked the door twice. He asked if the music was too loud. He laughed a little too quickly at jokes that weren't funny. When he looked at me, his eyes carried a question he did not know how to ask. "Are you going to ruin this?" I gave him a small smile and continued setting out glasses. I was not here to ruin anything. I was here to stop a theft. Guests began arriving before 5. Coats piled on the rack. Boots lined up by the door. The air filled with the familiar noise of people who had known each other for years. Laughter, greetings, small talk about weather and traffic and holiday plans. Neighbors. A few of my old friends. A couple from my son's work. People who had watched him grow up, who still called him by the childhood nickname he pretended to hate. She greeted them all as if she owned the home. "I'm so glad you could make it," she said, touching wrists, guiding shoulders, placing people where she wanted them. "We're trying to make this a tradition." Tradition! Another word that sounds harmless until you realize it is also a claim. My son poured wine. She floated from conversation to conversation, laughing softly, tilting her head at the right moments, gently steering attention away from me when it lingered too long. I noticed everything. I noticed how she positioned herself between my son and anyone who asked him direct questions. I noticed how she laughed a beat too late when someone said something kind about me. I noticed how her eyes flicked toward the study door more than once, checking the boundary like a person checking a lock. At 6, Elaine arrived. She came alone, wearing a dark coat and gloves that looked practical rather than fashionable. Her presence was steady, and the moment she stepped inside, something in my chest loosened. Not because she was my savior, because she was reality. A witness who could not be charmed. She hugged me gently. "You look well," she murmured. "So do you," I said. She leaned closer, her voice low. "I have copies." I nodded, just once. She did not hand me anything yet. Not in the hallway. Not where eyes could catch paper and curiosity could ignite too soon. She moved into the living room and began speaking with a neighbor about something ordinary. Her calm was a quiet weapon. She knew how to wait. An hour passed in careful normalcy. People ate. People drank. People laughed. Someone complimented the decorations. Someone asked about my garden. Someone asked when my son planned to propose. She answered that one. "Soon," she said, smiling brightly. "We're just waiting for the right moment." The right moment. My son blushed. He looked pleased and embarrassed at once. He glanced at me, unsure if I was offended. I lifted my glass slightly. "To good timing," I said. The toast earned polite laughter. She smiled wider, convinced my words meant consent. Then a man arrived. He did not belong. He stepped in quietly, without the warmth of the others, wearing a plain gray coat and a face that slid past attention. Most people barely looked at him. That was his skill, his invisibility. He scanned the room once. His eyes landed on her. She did not move. Not at first. But I saw it. The brief tightening around her mouth. The fraction of a pause. She walked to him quickly, too quickly, and placed a hand on his arm in a gesture meant to look welcoming, but was really a command. "You made it," she said. He nodded. "You said it was important." "Everything is under control," she replied, her voice sweet enough for anyone nearby to mistake it for friendliness. "Go grab a drink." He did not. His gaze drifted past her to the study door, then back to her. Something passed between them, wordless. He stepped away at last, disappearing into the crowd as if he had never been there. My son leaned toward her. "Who's that?" "A friend," she said smoothly. "From work." My son accepted it because he wanted to. I did not. Elaine found her way to my side. She did not look at the man directly, but her posture shifted just slightly. "That's him," I murmured. She gave the smallest nod. I thought so. My heart did not race. My hands did not shake. What I felt was a strange, quiet sadness, like standing at the edge of a frozen lake and realizing you can already hear the ice cracking. I set my glass down. I looked at my son. Then I walked to the center of the living room. I did not clap. I did not shout. I simply stood where the light from the chandelier fell cleanly onto my face and waited until conversation thinned enough for people to notice. It happened naturally. One person glanced, then another. Quiet spread in slow ripples, curiosity gathering like a tide. She watched me, her smile fixed, but her eyes narrowed slightly. My son's brow furrowed. "Mom?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out the photo. The room stilled. "I know what you did last December," I said, holding it up high enough that the front row of guests could see. "And soon everyone in this room will understand exactly what that cost." A murmur rose and died quickly, strangled by confusion. Her voice cut in immediately, bright and careful. "Elaine, please, this isn't the time." My name, spoken like a reprimand. Like she was the adult and I was the problem. I turned my head slowly toward her. "This is exactly the time." My son stepped forward, his face pale. "What is going on?" I looked at him, really looked. And in that moment the pain surged hard enough to make my throat tighten. Not because I feared the truth, but because I knew what it would do to him. Still, I kept my voice steady. "Someone has been moving paperwork connected to this house," I said. "Paperwork I did not sign." A hush fell so complete I could hear the faint click of the heater turning on. She laughed, a small dismissive sound. "That's ridiculous. No one is stealing anything." She's confused. Confused. There it was. My son turned to her. "What does she mean?" She touched his arm, and I watched his body respond automatically, leaning into her reassurance. "She's been under stress," she said softly. Grief does this. She's fixating. Another word people use to shrink a person's truth. I nodded once. That is why I went to my doctor, I said. Her eyes flickered. I reached into my pocket again and pulled out the folded letter. I did not hand it to my son yet. I held it up. My doctor documented that my memory is intact, I said calmly. That I am fully competent. The room shifted. People exchanged glances. Someone cleared their throat. The air changed. Not supportive yet, but attentive. Her smile began to strain. You did that? My son asked, stunned. I did, I replied. Because I know the first tactic in a family betrayal is to call the truth teller unstable. She took a step forward, her voice sharpening. Stop! I held her gaze. No, Elaine moved beside me then, quiet as a shadow. She placed a slim folder on the table without ceremony. I am Elaine, she said to the room, her voice carrying cleanly. I worked with her husband for years. I have reviewed public filings tied to this property. The man in the gray coat shifted near the back. I saw him. So did Elaine. Her eyes cut toward him. And I recognized that gentleman. The room turned, head swiveling as curiosity sharpened into focus. The gray-coated man froze, caught by attention like a light suddenly switched on. She continued, calm and precise. His name appears as a witness on multiple questionable documents across counties. Always near the paperwork, never the signer, never the owner. Her name hit the room like a dropped plate. The gray-coated man looked at the door. She followed his gaze and stepped slightly to block the path without touching him. Not physically, socially. The way you block someone with certainty and the weight of other eyes. My son looked between us, breathing hard. What is she talking about? What filings? She stepped in quickly, voice rising now, losing its careful sweetness. This is a mistake. They're trying to scare you. Your mother is being manipulated. Manipulated. Another attempt to shrink me. I turned the photo toward my son and held it out. He hesitated, then took it. I watched his eyes move over the details. I watched the exact moment his face changed. Not just surprise, recognition. The way the mind rebels and then relents. The way denial collapses when it sees its own handwriting. Because his signature was there too, he swallowed. I didn't. His voice broke. I didn't sign this. You did not, I said gently, but your name was used. He lifted his head, eyes wide, turning toward her. How is my name on this? Her face hardened for the first time. The mask was slipping. Because you agreed to let me handle things, she snapped, then caught herself, reassembling the smile. You said you trusted me. I trusted you, he said, voice shaking. I didn't authorize this. She stepped closer to him, lowering her voice into something intimate and persuasive. They're twisting it. You don't understand paperwork. You said you wanted me to take care of it. The room watched. No one spoke. Even the people who wanted to look away could not. I heard someone whisper, "Oh my God." The gray-coated man took a step toward the hallway. Elaine's voice cut through the air, crisp. If you leave, I will call the authorities and provide the documents I have already copied and distributed. Distributed. That word landed differently. She stiffened. What did you do? She demanded. Elaine did not raise her voice. I protected evidence. Her eyes flashed toward my son. You see what I'm dealing with? They're attacking me. They're humiliating me in front of your friends. My son stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. And then, finally, he stepped back. It was small. Barely a foot, but it was the first time all night he moved away from her instead of toward her. Her eyes widened. Don't, she said. as if he were a child disobeying. He blinked, confusion giving way to something heavier. "Why would you do this?" Her voice rose. "Because someone had to think about the future. Because your mother refuses to accept reality." The words came too fast now, too sharp. She was losing control of her own performance. I kept my tone even. "You could have asked," I said. "You could have waited. You could have done anything honest." She laughed, loud and brittle. "Honest? You think life rewards honest?" The room flinched at that. People shifted. Someone set a drink down too hard. My son's face crumpled. "I defended you," he whispered. "I fought with my mother for you." She snapped her head toward him. "Because you were supposed to. That's what you do when you love someone." Her words were wrong in a way even the kindest person could hear. Love does not sound like instruction. My son's eyes filled, but he did not wipe them. His hands hung useless at his sides, as if his body had not caught up to what his mind had learned. Elaine opened the folder on the table and slid out a set of pages. "There is more," she said, matter of fact. "A lien inquiry. A set of filings initiated recently. A trail of notary stamps connected to the same witness. And the timing aligns with her arrival in this household." Her face went pale. Not theatrical pale. Not fainting pale. A draining, real pale that happens when someone's plan collapses faster than they can adjust. She turned on Elaine, voice sharp. "This is harassment." Elaine looked at her. "It is accountability." The gray-coated man's jaw tightened. "I was paid to witness," he muttered, almost as if he couldn't help himself. "That's it." The room snapped toward him. A collective inhale. She whirled on him. "Shut up!" He flinched. My son stared at the man. "Paid by who?" Silence. The kind of silence that answers without words. Her lips parted. She searched for something to say. A new script. A new angle. Then she tried the oldest one. She turned toward me and let tears rise in her eyes, controlled and shimmering. "I tried," she said, voice trembling. "I tried to help. She hates me. She never wanted you to move on. She's punishing me because I love you." Her voice softened at the end, a plea aimed at my son. For a moment I saw him wobble. Old habits are hard to kill. He had been trained to soothe her distress. But then his gaze moved to the papers. To the photo. To the man who had just admitted he was paid to witness. And the wobble stopped. He took another step away from her. Her tears paused, startled, as if even her body had expected him to comply. "Stop," he said quietly. She blinked. "What?" "Stop talking," he repeated, voice still quiet, but steadier now. "Just stop." The room seemed to exhale. A collective release of tension, because someone had finally named what everyone was feeling. She stared at him in disbelief. "You're choosing her?" I watched my son's face tighten, pain and shame and anger twisting together. "I'm choosing the truth," he said. Her composure shattered. It was not a dramatic scream at first. It was the collapse of restraint. Her voice rose, sharp and ugly, spilling out words too fast to control. "You're ungrateful," she hissed. "After everything I did for you. After everything I sacrificed." People recoiled. The warmth of the gathering fell away. The room became a courtroom without benches. Elaine spoke again, still calm. "I have already contacted an attorney. The documents will be reviewed. If any signature is forged, if any filing is fraudulent, consequences will follow." Her eyes snapped to me, fury burning now. This is your doing. I met her gaze. You did it to yourself. She stepped toward me, hands clenched. For a second, I thought she might strike me. My son moved instinctively, not toward her, but between us. That, more than anything, was her true downfall, because it meant she had lost him. Her breath came fast, chest rising and falling. Her face twisted, not with sadness but with rage at being denied the prize she believed she had already won. You think you're so righteous, she spat at me, sitting in your house, acting like you own the world. I own my name, I said softly. I own my life, and I own the truth. She made a sound like a laugh, but it broke halfway. You're old, she snapped. No one listens to old women. The room went dead silent at that. I felt something settle inside me, heavy and clear. You're wrong, I said, calm as stone. They're listening now. And they were. I watched it happen, the exact second the room turned. Not because they loved me, not because they hated her, but because the mask was gone and the cruelty underneath was plain. Neighbors who had been polite now looked at her with disgust. Friends who had smiled at her earlier now avoided her eyes. Even my son's coworkers stared as if they wanted to pretend they had never met her. She looked around, realizing what she had done. This was not a private argument she could twist later. These were witnesses. Her hands trembled, her mouth opened, closed, opened again. She searched for a way to reverse time. There wasn't one. She turned toward the door, grabbing her bag. My son's voice stopped her. "Give me your phone!" She froze. "What?" she snapped. "Your phone," he said, louder this time. "Now!" she laughed. "No," Elaine stepped forward. "If you refuse, it will be noted. And if evidence disappears, that will also be noted." Her eyes flashed. She clutched her bag tighter. "This is insane!" My son's voice cracked. "Please, just please." That was the sound of his last hope dying. She stared at him, weighing the room, weighing her options. Then she did what people do when they are cornered. She threw the phone. Not at him, not at me. Onto the couch, hard, like a tantrum. Like a child slamming a toy down when the game is over. The sound of it hitting the cushion was small, but it echoed in the silence. She straightened, chin lifted, trying to regain dignity. "You'll regret this," she said, voice shaking now, not with fear, but with humiliation. She looked at me one last time. Her eyes were bright, not with tears, but with the raw shock of losing. Then she walked out. The door closed behind her with a quiet finality. For a moment, no one moved. Then my son sank into the nearest chair as if his legs had finally given up. He stared at the photo still in his hand, as though he could undo it by looking harder. "I didn't know," he whispered. I crossed the room and placed my hand on his shoulder. "I know," I said softly. "And that is why I waited until you could see it with your own eyes." He swallowed. "How long?" I looked toward the fireplace, the flame steady, indifferent. "Long enough," I said. Elaine gathered the papers calmly, as if tidying after a storm. Guests began to leave quietly, coats pulled on with awkward hands, voices low and shaken. Some hugged me. Some touched my arm. Some could not meet my eyes at all. I did not blame them. People like to believe betrayal happens in other homes. When the last guest left and the house fell quiet, my son remained seated, staring at the empty space where she had been. Finally he spoke. She said, "No one listens to old women." I sat in the chair across from him, letting the silence settle first. "People listen," I said. "They just don't always want to, until they have to." He nodded slowly, tears spilling at last. Not dramatic sobs, just the quiet release of someone realizing the ground beneath him had been false. Outside, snow began to fall again, light and steady, covering footprints before they could harden. Inside, the fire continued to burn, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something I had not expected to feel tonight. Not victory, relief. The morning after she left, the house looked the same. That was what unsettled me most. The entryway still held a scatter of salt from boots. The living room still smelled faintly of wine and cinnamon. The candles had burned down to stubs. Wax pooled in pale rings. A half-empty bowl of nuts sat on the table like proof that laughter had existed here, briefly, before it turned into something else. My son slept on the couch. He was curled on his side with his shoes still on, coat folded beneath his head like a pillow. In the weak winter light, he looked younger. Not the man who had raised his voice at me, not the man who had defended her, but the boy who used to fall asleep during movies and insist he was still awake. I stood in the doorway for a long moment without waking him. There is a kind of sorrow that only comes when you realize you cannot protect someone from their own heart. I went into the kitchen and made coffee. The familiar ritual steadied me. Water, grounds, the soft hiss and gurgle of the machine. Small sounds that reminded me life continues even after a room has held too much truth. When he finally stirred, he sat up slowly, blinking like the world had changed overnight. It had. He rubbed his face with both hands. "She's gone," he said, voice hoarse. "Yes," I replied. He stared ahead, unfocused. "I keep thinking she'll come back and explain it. Like there's some version of this where I'm misunderstood." I poured 2 cups and set one near him. People who live by explanation rarely stop at one. He let out a broken laugh that wasn't really laughter. "I feel stupid." "You feel human," I said. He looked at me then, eyes red, jaw tight. "You tried to tell me." "I tried to be careful," I corrected gently. "There is a difference." He flinched. "Careful." "Right." I sat across from him, hands wrapped around my mug. "If I had thrown everything at you all at once, you would have defended her harder. You would have thought I was panicking. And she would have used your defense as a shield." His shoulders sagged. He took a sip of coffee, then set the mug down as if he didn't trust his hands. "What happens now?" he asked. The question carried more than paperwork. It carried a childlike need for someone else to take over, to fix it, to pull him out of the humiliation. I understood that need. I also understood the danger of feeding it. "Now," I said, "we clean up what we can. We document what we must. And we stop pretending this was small." Elaine arrived just after 10. She did not knock gently. She knocked like someone who has stepped into responsibility without apology. When I opened the door, she handed me a sealed envelope and a small stack of copies. "I spoke with the attorney," she said. "We move quickly." My son stood behind me, eyes tired, face still bruised by truth. Elaine offered him a nod, not unkind, not indulgent either. "I'm sorry," she said simply. He swallowed. "Me too." Elaine stepped into the living room and set the papers on the table. Her movements were precise, as if arranging evidence calmed her. "She may try to contact you," she told my son. "If she does, do not respond. Save everything. Texts, calls, voicemails, all of it." My son nodded. Elaine turned to me. "We can file a report about suspected fraud. We can also request a temporary hold on any future filings tied to your property, depending on jurisdiction. The attorney will advise." I listened, asked questions, made notes. My calm was not performance. It was habit. When a problem becomes real, I become quieter, sharper. My son watched me as if he were seeing a part of me he had forgotten. At noon, his phone buzzed. He stared at the screen like it might bite him. Her name. He looked up at me, eyes wide. She's calling. Don't answer, Elaine said flatly. He hesitated. I did not tell him what to do. I simply watched him, giving him the room to choose the truth again. He let it ring. A minute later, a text appeared. I will explain. Please, you owe me that. My son's face tightened. I don't owe her anything. Elaine's gaze stayed on the phone. Save it. He did. Then another message. Your mother manipulated you. You know she did. My son's breath caught. He looked at me, shame flaring, as if the words had power. I reached across the table and rested my hand over his. This is what she does, I said quietly. She replaces reality with suggestion. He nodded, swallowing hard. It's like even now she's trying to pull me back. Yes, Elaine said, because she believes you are still useful. That word landed like a slap, and I saw my son's eyes fill. He turned away quickly, standing and walking toward the window. His shoulders rose and fell, fighting for control. I let him have that moment. When he spoke again, his voice was small. How did I not see it? I answered carefully because the truth here mattered. You saw what you needed to see, I said. You wanted comfort. You wanted a future that felt less lonely. That isn't a crime. It's just a vulnerability. And she targeted it. He nodded slowly, staring out at the pale yard. I let her talk about you like you were fragile. I did not rush to comfort him with easy forgiveness. That kind of comfort would be for me, not for him. I heard it, I said. But what matters now is what you do with the knowledge. He turned back, face wet. I'm sorry. I know, I said, and I meant it. In the afternoon, we went through the house together, not because she had left belongings that mattered, but because I needed my son to see the space differently, to stop associating it with her warmth and start associating it with his own responsibility. We found small things. A scarf draped over a chair, a lipstick smudge on a mug, a receipt in the trash from the bank, dated the day she had borrowed my car. My son stared at it for a long time, then handed it to Elaine without a word. In the study, I opened the filing cabinet and showed my son the folder I had built. His face tightened as he flipped through it. You did all this alone? Not entirely, I said, glancing at Elaine. Elaine's mouth curved slightly. She did the hardest part. She stayed steady. My son's eyes moved over the papers again, then stopped at the blank sheet that had replaced the letter. He held it up. She did this. Yes, I said. He stared at the emptiness of the page, as if it were an insult, written in invisible ink. It's like she wanted to show you she could. She did, I replied. Power is intoxicating to people who don't have integrity. He swallowed. And she thought you wouldn't fight back. I closed the drawer slowly. Many people think that about older women. That evening, after Elaine left with copies and instructions and the kind of calm that makes chaos feel manageable, my son and I sat by the fireplace. The house was quiet in a way it had not been for months. No perfume hanging in the hallway, no laughter that sounded too practiced, no sense of being subtly supervised. Just the crackle of fire and the occasional wind pressing against the windows. My son stared at the flames. I feel like I failed you. I watched the fire a moment before answering. You failed your instincts, I said. But you did not fail me. Not in the end. His throat bobbed as he swallowed. I don't know how to trust myself again. You start small, I said. You listen when something feels off. You ask questions. You let discomfort be a teacher, instead of an enemy. He nodded. eyes fixed on the fire. She said, "No one listens to old women." I leaned back in my chair and let the silence hold that statement for a moment. Statements like that deserve air. They deserve to be seen. "She was wrong," I said. My son turned toward me. "You were so calm, even when she was trying to make you look crazy." I held his gaze. "Because I know what I am, and I know what I'm not." He nodded slowly, almost reverent. I forgot that. I did not correct him. I let him sit with the truth of that forgetting. People learn better when they feel the weight of what they lost. Later that night, he went upstairs to his old room. I remained by the fire. I thought about the gathering, the way the room had turned, the way her mask had fallen, the way my son had stepped between us, not to protect her, but to protect me. That single movement was the real justice. Not her leaving, not the papers, not even the coming legal consequences. The real justice was my son returning to himself. Outside, snow fell again, light and steady, covering the last traces of footprints in the yard. Inside, the fire burned with the same patient certainty it had the night before. In that quiet, I understood something simple. Betrayal is loud when it arrives, but recovery is quiet when it stays. And strength, real strength, does not shout to be believed. It waits. Then it speaks. And this time, they listened. I didn't know it then, but that quiet morning after the truth came out was the beginning of something steadier than trust. It was clarity. The kind that doesn't rush in, but stays, even when the house is silent and the fire has burned low. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever watched a truth surface slowly and change the way you see the people you love, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next story, where quiet strength speaks louder than anyone expects. Looking back now, I understand this much. Justice doesn't always arrive with noise or applause. Sometimes, it comes in the simple act of being believed.